always, Claire from Woodshed Theory, and I'm coming to you today with something I'm really excited about. I have created a DIY forage mat tutorial for you to follow along with. If you know me, you know I love bunnies. I have two bunnies of my own, Timmy and Benny. They have their own Instagram. They are my best friends. My best bun friends, and I always love making them costumes and toys and whatever. I just like to DIY for them. So what I thought I would do is recreate a forage mat for them. I originally saw this forage mat from the company called TokiHut, and when I saw it, I was instantly enamored with it. And supposedly, so was the rest of the internet, because the entire bunny community has purchased one of these mats. I wanted to DIY one because I love to sew and it makes me happy to make things for my bunnies. Also, I thought that maybe some of you would like to DIY one. The one from TokiHut is beautiful. I will link it down below if you are not crafty and you just want to buy it. That's totally cool, but I like to make things on my own, so I use some of their ideas and I use some of my own ideas as well to make my very own forage mat. So let's get started.
We're going to start with 3/4 of a yard each of polar fleece and a utility fabric with a non-slip backing on it. If you are wondering where to find that, you can find it in the back of the fabric store next to where they keep all the foam. Now I'm just laying out the fabric here. This is going to be the top of your work. I'm taking a quilting ruler, which I have to say is my favorite thing on the planet right now, and some tailor's chalk, and I am drawing out a 24-inch by 24-inch square onto the fabric. Next, you're going to cut out your square using a 1-inch seam allowance all around, and make sure that you save your scraps of this fleece fabric. Now you're going to do the exact same thing, cut out a 24 by 24 inch square with a 1-inch seam allowance of the utility fabric with the plastic backing. And then cut it out, and you should have 2 of the same size square, 1 of the polar fleece and 1 of the utility fabric. Now this part I really liked. Lay out your polar fleece, and then you can get creative with things you have around the house to kind of plan out where you want your objects on the forage mat to go. I decided on doing a smaller head of lettuce, a big head of lettuce, some carrots, and some flowers. As you can see, I used some paper plates, some dishes. I cut out some carrot patterns there. Anything that you want to put on your snuffle mat, and I'm just doing a quick outline with the tailor's chalk. What I like about this is I know where I'm going to be putting things, but also it is washable, so I don't have to worry about seeing these lines again in the future. The first thing that we're going to be attaching to our forage mat are the carrots. You will need 3 of them. You'll see me doing the tracing of them right now. I do suggest that you put the carrots on first because they are the flattest thing on the forage mat, and that will make it easier for you to sew them down before you put all the other bulky things on top of your mat. And there you have it, a beautiful carrot. Now that you have all 3 of your carrots cut out with the seam allowance, I am going in with my ruler and just making a straight X about 2 inches down from the top of the carrot. I think I did a 2-inch long line and then about a 1.5-inch long cross. And I'm going to use that as a template to cut the cross into the carrots. You can also cut this with scissors, but I really wanted the line to be nice and sharp, so I carefully cut it with my rotary tool. Now for the tops of your carrots, you're going to want to cut out 3 squares. They should be about 2 inches by 4 inches. This will be the green section at the top of the carrot. Now I am going in and cutting the top of the carrot with a wiggly line. The reason I'm doing this is to make it look a little bit more natural. And then across that top, I'm just cutting about 1 inch in all along the top, just so we've got some little carrot ruffles, would you call them? And then I am just going to fold those tops into a pleat. I believe each one had 3 pleats, and this will give you that 3D effect for the top of the carrot. Then I am going to pin the top of the carrot onto our mat right where they need to be sewn on. Alright, 8 minutes into the video and we're finally using this sewing machine. So you are just going to thread your machine with green thread and go ahead and sew along the bottom of the carrot tops that you have pinned on. The next part might not seem as important as it is, but I would definitely recommend it. Take an iron and then iron down all of the seam allowance on the carrots. This is going to make it a lot easier for you to pin it down to the forage mat. All right, now that we have our tops sewn down, fold back the seam allowance on the carrots and go ahead and pin them onto your mat, and you're going to pin all the way around. Here's where I learned that it's helpful to cut the tip off of the carrot, and it helps you to be able to fold down the tip of the carrot and pin it without having to worry about any excess bulky fabric. Now that everything is pinned down, I went around the edges of each carrot with a really thick basting stitch. This is just to help you when you take the pins out to be able to do the top stitching on the carrot with the machine. So make sure to make the stitches really big because you're going to be cutting out this thread after you are finished doing the top stitching. Now I know this basting part is a little fiddly, but I absolutely recommend it. It makes it so much easier to do the top stitching on top of the carrot. All right, back at the sewing machine, I have the machine loaded up with orange thread to match the carrot, and I'm just going around the entire carrot and top stitching right at the edge. If you take your time with this, you should be fine. You don't need to rush. It doesn't have to be perfect because the thread should match the carrot, so you really can't see it. But you just want to make sure that you're getting that pocket effect where you can put the treats inside the carrot. You'll also notice that I am going slow and constantly turning the work, just lifting my foot and turning the work. And if you do that as well, it'll be a lot easier for you to get around the entire carrot without making any mistakes. Look at our sweet carrots that we just sewed on. I am now just going through and picking out all of that basting stitch that we did to help us hold the carrots on before we sewed with the machine. All right, next part is my personal favorite part. We're going to cut these strips out to make the lettuce heads or the cabbage heads, whatever you'd like to refer to them as. I'm cutting 2-inch strips of green felt. I won't show you me cutting all of the strips, but basically I think I ended up needing about 6 to 8 feet of strips per cabbage. Now I am going in with my ruler and marking 1-inch increments down these strips. And this way I'll have a guide when I want to cut out my notches. Take your scissors and cut about 1.5 inches down onto your strips, and you should get this grass looking effect. Now, taking the strips that we just made, I am going to take one and put it around one of the circles that we drew earlier. I have the edge of the strip right up along the edge of the circle that we made. And then I'm going to pin down that first complete circle so that we have a guide when we're sewing the cabbage onto our forage mat. Back at the sewing machine with the green thread, you will sew along the inside edge of that strip along the circle that you just pinned. And just take your time, turn the work as you go. If you push it through, you shouldn't have any issues. You just want to make sure that you are catching the strip into the sewing machine so that it is sewed down. After you have finished doing your first circle, you're just going to continue to add these strips in, sewing them in a spiral pattern. Eventually, it is going to become too difficult for you to continue turning the work. So just work up until you can't sew any more strip on the machine. And then we'll go in after this and hand sew the middle of the cabbage down ourselves. Now take some thread and whip stitch down the rest of the strip in a spiral pattern until you have filled in the entire space. You'll do the other cabbage the exact same way. Here I am finishing that middle up with some hand stitching. If you find you have too much extra strip left at the end, you can go ahead and just do a quick roll and sew that down into the center of the cabbage. Here I'm just reminding myself where I had placed the flowers. I'm going to cut out 5 pieces of felt each for each of the larger flowers. So here I'm just tracing the template 5 times, and I have it doubled up so I can cut out 10 more quickly. Now when I do cut these out, I am going to kind of wobble the line as I cut them out, and this is going to make each of them look more like a flower petal. For the smaller flowers, I'm tracing this small cookie cutter, and I need 4 pieces of felt for each flower. I think I did 3 flowers, so that is 12 pieces of felt. Now I'm just going ahead and cutting them out in the same way, just wobbling that line to make it look more like a flower petal. This next part, of course, is optional, but I'm going to cut out a set of leaves for each one of the flowers that I made. To make the center of the flowers, we're going to take the cutoffs from the mat fabric and cut them into 1/2-inch strips, and then cut along the strips to make the kind of grass technique that we made for the cabbages. All right, now you have all of the pieces cut out for your flowers. I am just hand sewing down the base of the first flower. Just whip stitch that into place, and then you can start adding your petals. To do that, I'm just folding one of the circles into 4 and then sewing each one of the 4 petals into their own quadrant on top of that first circle. Roll up that yellow strip of fabric for your flower center and sew that into the center of the flower. For the leaves, it's the same thing. You're just going to place them underneath each flower and tack them down. The smaller flowers were done in a very similar way to the larger ones. You're just going to whip stitch down the first petal, and then the only difference is I put 3 petals on top of the smaller flowers instead of 4. And then exactly the same as the big flowers, roll up the middle of the small flowers and sew that into place. And tack down the smaller flowers' leaves. Lay the other square of fabric on top of your mat, sides facing each other. And then pin the squares together all around the edges. After you have everything pinned, go around and snip off each of the 4 corners of the square. This is going to help you when you turn the work right side out. All right, we're in the home stretch now. We are sewing along that 1-inch seam allowance all the way around the square, but you will want to leave about a 6-inch space or opening in your sewing so that you can turn out the work. So make sure you do that, or you'll be picking it out later. Once you have that sewed, you're going to turn the work right side out. And I'm just going in and poking out all of the corners to make sure they are nice and square. Then I'm taking an iron and ironing down all of those seams. You'll see I accidentally sewed in a carrot there, but I just cut it off later, so it's fine. And we are making sure that all of the seams are flat and straight. Now that you've finished ironing, take a needle and thread and sew up the hole on the side of your work, and then you will have a completed mat. For the final step of our project, I'm just going around the square one more time and sewing about a 1/2 inch away from the edge. This is just going to make sure that when we wash the forage mat, nothing gets all jumbled up on the inside. We're sewing down all of the inside seams and making sure that it stays flat in the future. Now, this isn't necessary for the completion of the mat, but it will give you a more professional look, and I think it looks really nice, so I went ahead and did it.
Alright guys, so that is my tutorial on how to make one of these forage mats. I hope that you really enjoyed it. You may notice in a second I'm going to show you some footage of my bunnies playing with a forage mat. They love it. You may notice that the color of the flowers in the one that they're using is different, and that is because I made two, and I'm going to be giving one of these forage mats away over on my bunny's Instagram. So make sure you check that out if you have a bunny who might like it, or a hamster, or a gerbil, or a guinea pig, or a dog, or whoever. If you might like it, that's cool too. You can win it. So have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon.